Hi, I'm Angela Young, and this is another segment of Practical Magic. And the point of these presentations, the point of these little talks are to share about just regular everyday events and how they're used for spiritual awakening or spiritual evolution, rather than being used for, let's say, continuing illusions or projecting the ego or continuing karma. Rather than being used in a way that so many of us, myself included, are conditioned to use events, finding ways to use them for awakening your mind, which is really exciting. So in this little episode, if you will, I'm going to talk about a situation that my family and I just went through, which was a vacation to a kids resort. It was called the Great Wolf Lodge. And the reason why this is so interesting to me was that it was just so jam-packed full of little learning lessons. So I'm gonna go ahead and take you through that. So of course, before we go on any vacation, and this seems like a recurring theme for me now, there's usually some expectation that goes along with the vacation, right? Like you decided to go here for reasons X, Y, and Z, probably to relax or to have fun or to connect with your family, which are all great things. I have just learned so clearly over this past summer to not have any expectation for what things are for, and to not even label like going out and doing what is supposed to be fun as more fun or more enlightening or more anything than just regular life, because it seems to be that I'm wrong a lot of times, and like I don't know what situations are for. So anyways, this is another one of those, and let me share. So the moment that we pull up, we just stayed for one night, but we pulled up and my husband was driving and I was gonna hop out of the car and go to the lobby to check in. And this is how it all started. So before I even opened the door to get into the lobby, the door is slammed open in my face. So I'm walking up, right? And the door is just like swung open. And there's this lady standing there blocking the door with like a baby on her hip, screaming and yelling. And I'm not sure if she's screaming and yelling at me, but the vibration of it, like I honestly can't even remember what she was saying, but the vibe of it, she could have been cussing. Like it was intense, right? And I'm like, whoa, I just feel that emotion go through me like, whew. And meanwhile, I can't like move away, like she's literally blocking the door. So it was just this really intense feeling that I was feeling right off the bat. And I ended up noticing that she was not yelling at me. She was yelling at, I don't know, her friend, her sister, someone else that was walking in the other direction about going the wrong way or something. But it was very tricky because the way that it was perceived by me, someone opening the door and screaming, "You're going the wrong way," seemed like it could have been at me. Anyways, so what went on within me was all of the reactive feelings that go along with it. It was like, first off, maybe a little bit of like fear and also judgment. There was a little bit of judgment of her, and then a little bit of fear that I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. Like it's so weird, like social anxiety or something. I didn't want to make her feel like I thought she was weird or something. All of that going through, and I just notice it. I'm just in this like moment, I just notice all of that, and I just give it a big hug and smile, and like how funny is like that internal dialogue. And I just once I feel the feeling of just recognizing all of that upset feeling and the thoughts that are associated with it, I just have a big smile on my face. And I ended up, she didn't move. She just stood there for quite some time. So I ended up just like scooting over and finding a different door and entering from a different door. And I found that to be so symbolic. It was so funny that, you know, there was one door of perception, right? And then like after going through that little emotional turmoil, finding a different door of perception and walking through that door. It was really cool. And then once I enter the building itself, it doesn't end there. Immediately, I'm just met with like screaming, crying children, a long line to check in, and all these things that might make you go, oh God, right? And initially they kind of do. You're like, oh, But what came to my mind, what the thoughts that came to my mind were, oh, I get it. This is how this trip is going to be. This trip is not necessarily for like having a super relaxing time. This trip is going to be all about finding my center within and about learning how to really flow with the moment. So knowing that, yet again, big smile on the face, standing in this long line to check in, and it's just all good, you know what I mean? The triggers might come up a little bit, but then they're easily recognized and subsided. Now this continued throughout the entire trip. It had those notes of energy to it. Let's see, the next thing that was really a notifier to me was when we were about to go to sleep in our room. So it was decided that I was gonna sleep. There were 3 different beds. So we were 2 people on a bed, and I was gonna sleep with the baby because he wakes up in the night and we all co-sleep usually, but in this case there were 3 different beds. So I co-sleep with the baby and feed him through the night. And I noticed right away that the baby was not really sleeping well. Like he wanted to be held the whole time. If I even put him down or if I moved a little, he would wake up. Maybe it's from being in a different environment, I don't know. Overall, it's for awakening my mind. I know that, it all is. So the thoughts that were going through my head were, wow, I'm not gonna get any sleep and I'm gonna be tired tomorrow. And I just recognized that right away. That made me feel negative. I was having this negative feeling, and I recognized right away that my negative feeling wasn't actually coming from the fact that the baby wasn't sleeping or that I'm not going to get sleep. See, that's a neutral situation. That doesn't have to feel negative. What feels negative about it is my belief that that's going to have a negative impact then on my time here or whatever it is. And I just gently reminded myself like, oh, wait a minute, no, just because you're not going to get a lot of sleep, that means nothing. Like you don't know how it's going to play out. You could feel totally fine. Everything could be cool. And in fact, that's what it's for. It's for bringing up those negative beliefs and getting a look at them and seeing why your reality might be littered with a bunch of negative feelings based on perceptions and belief systems. So as I shifted to that feeling, that different lens of perception, suddenly I felt better, right? I was at peace. Even though I wasn't getting a whole bunch of sleep, I just felt good. It was interesting though, because it wasn't necessarily as easy as that. There was a situation twice that happened, which never really happens. Like I was lying there with the baby, can't really move, and if you're ready for a little too much information share, I felt like I had to pee. But I couldn't really move and I really didn't want to wake the baby up. So I was like, well, I can't even fall asleep with the baby in my arms because I know that I'm gonna have to get up and go to the bathroom. So I waited, right? And I waited for the right moment, which was, who knows, 45 minutes, an hour. Time kind of gets tricky when you're just lying there in the dark. But whatever, I'm just lying there, I pee, I come back, and the same situation repeats itself. And it's funny because it's not like I'm drinking a bunch of water or anything, but eventually the same situation where I had to pee and I'm just lying there and I feel like it's not really the right moment to get up. And it was such an opportunity. The fact that it replayed itself again, almost identically, it was like, oh, I see, the belief is getting brought up again. And I just laid there in relaxation with the fact that it's okay if I'm not sleeping. Everything's actually perfect. Everything's fine. All right, fast forward to the morning. I'm not gonna lie, I laid there in that bed and I did have some fantasies about what my morning was gonna be like. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get up first because I'm already lightly sleeping anyways. I'm going to walk by myself down to grab a coffee. I've been really liking coffee lately. I usually don't, but I am now, and I think it's because I'm just sleeping a little bit differently and coffee's been super fun. It's like, woo, a little kick in the morning. But anyways, I was gonna get my coffee and send an email by myself. Well, that's not what happened. Come the morning, I did not wake up first. My daughter ends up waking me up. She's ready to go, right? And I'm like, oh, sweetie, I didn't want to act disappointed, you know? I'm like, oh, okay, this is how this is gonna go. Cool. So I get up, I have to admit there were a little bit of triggers in that morning, a little bit of like a lot of chaos going on, and really having to watch myself to not go there, right? Anyways, my husband ended up taking the kids down instead to go get donuts. There was like a donut place within this kid resort, of course. Gotta have donuts. And I had asked him to get me a coffee instead. Meanwhile, I sat there and send my email. So it was just playing out differently, and I'm just observing how you can go with the flow. It doesn't have to match up to the exact expectations that you wanted. It still can work out. In fact, it is always working out perfectly. Just relax into it. All right, so my husband comes back from getting the donuts, and he lets me know, he relays to me that getting donuts did not go that smoothly. That in fact, one child in particular couldn't decide what donut they wanted, then decided they didn't want any donuts, I think it was, or maybe just, they got the donut they didn't want, type of a thing, and just having a hard time overall, and ended up not eating breakfast, okay? And it seemed like that child was actually okay with that. It was like, okay, that happened, you weren't hungry or whatever, they didn't have what you wanted, so you didn't eat. Cool, keep going. Next thing on the itinerary is we are headed down to play in the arcade. And the child, this is like an hour later maybe, the child who had not eaten is now hungry, but everyone wants to play in the arcade. So I found this moment, like I was like, okay, I felt good about just honoring that kid's needs. Like, all right, you guys go play in the arcade, I'll go get some lunch with you. What do you want? Let's go find a place to get lunch within the little resort. So that's what we do. And this child eats lunch while everyone plays. By the time everybody's finishing up, it seems like, okay, so the other kids are walking from the arcade, and one of the other child's finishing lunch, and we're about to go to the water park now. This is all supposed to be really fun, right? Wrong. The child who was finishing the lunch decides, no, she wants to go to the arcade now, and everyone else wants to go to the water park. And this was a slightly different moment than the moment before. I felt pretty strongly, no, I think we're all gonna be a group right now and go to the water park, because it's just so much involved with finding a place to sit, not getting separated, knowing where everyone is. And also, I was honestly feeling a little bit, I was starting to get a little bit of overwhelm, and I was recognizing that it's probably best for everybody if we just sit for a second and like chill. So that child has a little bit of a meltdown, right? It's not what she wanted, so she's gonna have a little bit of a meltdown. You know, it was a very interesting moment though, because I felt the emotion arise within me where I wanted to almost shame her for having a meltdown. Well, you should have eaten breakfast here, and if you would have just done this and that and this and that, this would have all been fine. You would have gone to the arcade. That was the story going on within my head. I did not act it out, but I was certainly feeling it. And it feels achy, right? It feels like frustration. It feels like, oh. And I did notice that, and I just took a deep, deep breath. And I perhaps wasn't in the most clear state to have a full turnaround right then, but later, as I was sitting on the chair outside by the pool, and I was just holding space for my daughter to have this meltdown, it was very clear that it's okay. She's having these feelings, and that's actually totally okay. And I don't need to say anything. I don't need to make stories about it. In fact, my stories are totally off base. I just need to have an open space for her to be able to feel what she's feeling right now. I did tell her, you know, we're probably going to be able to go to the arcade still. Don't worry. And she's just feeling what it feels like to have an expectation loss. And I know what that feels like. I've been going through it all day. So, yeah. Now, there was another moment where I took the baby to the bathroom to feed the baby. I had to pee, and it just seemed like a good combination. I'm just gonna feed the baby on the toilet. And as I'm sitting in this bathroom, I'm feeling like, oh, okay, finally a moment. Like, I'm just gonna relax here. I got the door shut, just like me in my bathroom stall and the baby, right? Whew. And I get quiet, and it is just anything but quiet in this crazy kid resort. I can hear outside the door I can hear, but it's at this point it's from like kind of a distance because it's like muffled through the door, but it's just children screaming bloody murder. Like, it's so funny with kids. You're in a place that's supposed to be super fun. It's designed for children, but kids are still, they're still going through all of their learning lessons and their roller coasters and everything. It doesn't really matter what the circumstances are with kids. They're still going to be going through all of that stuff. So I was listening, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually part of it. That's just learning. It's beautiful, actually. It's like kids are not so attached to circumstances yet where they're like, oh, this is a place where I'm going to be, 100% happy or whatever because I'm in this place. No, they're just fully themselves all the time. It's happening. Anyhow, I can just hear like bloody murder screaming, and I'm just reminded again, but this time sort of at a distance, what this trip is for. This trip is for finding my center within the storm, finding the eye of the storm, or whatever you would want to call it, however you want to phrase it. And it was so obvious, it just felt so good. It's like, oh yes, I remember now. Everything's sort of making sense. And that feels good. That's really how you draw back all of your projected emotion that you have projected outwards and put onto circumstances, and you call it back home. And you can tell that you're on the right track because it does have that note of feeling good and feeling peaceful. All right, so let's see. The water park's cool. I just feel like chilling outside. It was like pretty much an all indoor water park. For some reason, I was like not really digging it. I was having a grand old time just hanging out outside in the sunshine. Come to the end, it's coming towards time to go home, and the daughter who had wanted to go to the arcade is starting to bring that up again. I am just totally chilling, and I'm not feeling like it's time to go to the arcade. What's really interesting is that little tiny conflict of interest, and my daughter starts to show signs of like having a little meltdown again. That little tiny conflict of interest was bringing up within me all the feelings of shame again. Like, well, you should have done this, and if you would have done this, we wouldn't be in this situation, that type of thing. I did not act it out. I just noticed my tendencies to think that things have to be the way that I think they're gonna be. For example, like I'm creating a story. I'm thinking that this child is in some way wrong for not wanting to eat breakfast when she wanted to eat breakfast, which is really, she's listening. She's listening to her inner guidance. And some part of my conditioning is showing up right now. My conditioning to say, well, more important than listening to your internal guidance is to go with the flow of everybody involved and like, that sort of thing, which is definitely something that I'm conditioned towards. So I just noticed that. I noticed how crappy it felt and that I was about to project it. I also noticed the tendency of when situations arise, the tendency to want to project them outwards in terms of teaching a child a lesson that you think they need to be learning in this moment. And that lesson typically has to do with all of your conditioning. And we might teach lessons that we, by all means, do not want to teach. Those lessons are all about our negative stories that we're then trying to impose upon this child. And let me show you how this played out for me. So instead of acting out all that internal dialogue that was going on, I just felt it, and it was slightly uncomfortable, and I just stayed open, did not react, kind of thing. It just got quiet, basically. Next thing I know, there's a moment that arises where we're waiting for her brother. Her brother has gone somewhere in the water park, and which is all cool. We're just sort of waiting for him. We don't know exactly where he is, and he's going to come back at a certain time. And it just occurs to me, I'm like, wow, actually this is a perfect time to go to the arcade. It's arising naturally, right? It's like, okay, you want to go now? I'm feeling it. You're feeling it. All right, let's go. So I took her to the arcade, and this is so funny. We step in, and one of the first games we play is like this little push button, and there's a light that goes around in a circle, and you want to push the button when the light is on the jackpot, like it's like a timer type thing. And I'm like, oh, I used to love this game when I was a kid. Let's play this game. And I feel that feeling of like, she puts her money in, and this is so embarrassing, not embarrassing, it just like shows a little bit about me. Like, I almost felt the feeling like, oh no, move over, let me play, because I used to love this game as a kid and I'm gonna win for you. But I didn't do that. That was just what I was feeling. It was like an impulse, and then I didn't do it, and I just let her do it. I put the money in, and she just like goes, and she just hits the button, and she hits the jackpot. I was like, it was like beeping and going off, and I was like, did you just hit the jackpot? And it was just so perfect. It was such a perfect accumulation of the day. Let me explain. In that moment, the insight that was coming to me was like, do you see how perfect this child is? Do you see how perfect she was listening to herself? She didn't need to go with the order of things and eat breakfast with everyone else. It was totally fine for her to eat when it was right for her, to go to the arcade when it was right for her. There's space for everybody here. And we just have to be open to when the natural moment arises, rather than resisting, and also to let go of some of my like impulsive control behaviors that I have that are coming up pretty strongly. And when I let go, when I don't act on those impulses, everything's fine. In fact, she hit the jackpot. So yay. It was really obvious for me, that had I acted on my impulses and my sort of negative storylines that really didn't feel good, they felt a little bit shameful, a little bit like, had I played those out, like the stories of, well, you shoulda, I would be teaching things I don't even want to teach. In fact, I'm going to step down from teaching at all and just let life teach and just be in flow with that and learn at the same time that my daughter is learning. Well, that sums it up. That was our trip to the Great Wolf Lodge. So full of learning for everyone involved. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.